want to get your thoughts because I did not watch. I did not follow. All I saw was one stat line, and I don't know if it was halftime or the game.
What the hell's the matter with you?
My Austin Novosad take is aging beautifully because he clearly looks like the better quarterback of the team.
Oh, yes.
3 of 7 for 30 yards. That's
that was
what
a
you want to
halftime.
see out of your starting quarterback.
That was a halftime line.
3 for 7 for 30 yards against your own defense. You're not lighting it up there.
His final line of the game was 5 of 9 for 58 for Austin Novosad. So, yeah, he's in the mix. I thought he played well.
Dante Moore. Dante Moore's 3 for 7.
He was 12 of 20 for 140.
Ew.
Yeah, he did throw a Hail Mary.
Gave him some passes.
Threw a Hail Mary pick at the end of the game. It was fun, man. It was a great weekend. I look at spring football, so there's not that much to take away from it. The atmosphere was awesome. The place was basically, not fully, I would say, give it a
be honest,
70% full.
Bex, be honest.
The end zones were empty. The sides were pretty full, if that makes sense. Like the sidelines were pretty full. The student section, look, I give the student section a lot of crap at times during the regular season because I think there's a Californication of the student body that has happened over the last 20 years, and it just doesn't mean as much as it used to for Oregon football.
I thought they've been better the last 2 years.
I mean, they were great for the Ohio State game. There's a handful of games I'm looking up like, what the hell? Where are you? What are we doing here? You got nothing else to do. Get your ass in the seats. Let's go. Tickets are free, damn it. But the student section was full. That was awesome to see. I just think everything that came together for them. So on the weekend, they set a new program record, which they broke their last year's record for players drafted into the NFL. You had a massive recruiting weekend. The number one recruit in the country was in town. We'll see. A lot of people think he's going to go to Georgia. Jackson Cantwell, but he loved his visit, and he was in town. Beautiful weather. You get to see the spring game atmosphere. Like the stats and the numbers are always misleading. There's guys that have big spring games that you're like, wait, what happened to that guy? And they don't do anything. There's guys that don't do anything or play bad, and you're like, look at that. He's really good. Like, there's never a direct correlation to it. The main thing that I look for is watching young guys for the first time. I thought the quarterbacks were fine. It's hard to execute when you have 2 or 3 backup offensive linemen. That was a constant theme of the day. The defensive line was dominating the offensive line. But when you rotate and split it into 2, the offensive line is the unit that will always struggle the most. I thought a lot of the young secondary guys jumped off the screen. Ife Obadegwu looked awesome. Trey McNutt was making plays. Naeem Offord made a couple of nice plays in the end zone. And then on the other side, you had all these young wide receivers, which I think fans are curious to see how that position shakes out this year. Jeremiah McClellan looked good. Dylan Gresham was probably the standout of the game. He had a breakaway touchdown at one point on a slant. You saw some awesome catches from DeCorian Moore. He made one early in the game from Novosad on like the first drive. So the number one wide receiver in the country looked good. And then I joked about it earlier. Kenyon Sadiq was like, he was the biggest takeaway. The way his physicality, the way his body looks at this point. We heard it a year ago, the talking point, what he's baby Brock Bowers, but he was also in a tight end room behind a guy who was drafted in the second round this weekend, and Terrence Ferguson.
The all-time leader.
Now the runway is clear, and your tight end number 1, he's going to be weapon number 1. They want to get him 100 touches this year, I think was the quote from Will Stein. He looks the part, and he was awesome this weekend.
Here was Dan Lanning on his post-spring game press conference on Kenyon Sadiq.
Well, I've seen it every day that he's been here, right? This is a guy that's constantly improved, that's worked really, really hard, embraced whatever role he's wearing for the team, and been able to help us since the day he got here. So, I think you saw some with Kenyon, what we get to see every single day in practice.
He also talked about, you mentioned their draft class. They had a nice draft class, a lot of Ducks getting drafted over the weekend. Here was Dan Lanning's thoughts on those guys going to the NFL.
Yeah, proof's in the pudding, right? I mean, you just look at it, you're setting a program record for guys being able to drafted to get drafted in the NFL this year. Every year our draft picks have gone up since we've been here. And that's really credit to those players that have worked extremely hard, getting an opportunity to live out their dream. Really excited for them and really grateful for everything they did for Oregon.
And you mentioned Dante Moore. I rib you a little bit about the Novosad Moore thing, but here was Dan Lanning's takeaway or thoughts on why they didn't go into the portal for the quarterback position.
Because I like who we have on our roster. Yeah, I like the guys that we got, right? And that's always been something. You want to create competition in every position. We've utilized the portal at times when we felt like that helped us and enhanced us, and had an opportunity to go have success. There's also sometimes the portal, it's not all under your control. If you're lower in a certain roster spot, you need to be able to add guys to make sure that you can go out there and practice. Roster limits have changed some of those things. There's been some other adjustments, and we'll see how those rules continue to change and shape. But ultimately, I feel good about the guys we have at that position.
I think it's a pretty friendly quarterback system. There's not like a lot of overthinking you can do in that because you just
execute the offense,
right.
Baby. Get rid of the ball and execute the offense.
Exactly, and that's the big part of it is get rid of the ball, right? Whether it's your running backs, your tight ends, your receivers, It's get to the ball to playmakers, let them largely take it from there. I know I've said this probably too many times for Duck fans liking, fascinated to see how that goes this year.
Yeah.
Because this is the first time in his career as the coach at Oregon, he's not going to the experienced veteran college quarterback. He's handing the keys to Dante Moore, and we haven't seen Dante Moore play in a game in a while.
Yeah.
I largely joke with you about the Novosad thing, but if things don't go Dante Moore's way, does Novosad actually get a shot this year? I know the defense is important. I understand Kenyon Sadiq is obviously awesome. You mentioned some DBs. The special teams is important. We're just so conditioned in that sport to care so much about that spot. And this is the first time as the coach at Oregon and the head coach in general, he's not turning the keys over to a 5 and 6 year guy.
Yeah, I would say the similarity that I would make is probably his first year, because Bo was experienced. He had played a lot at Auburn, but he was also hell, I didn't want him at Oregon when he first transferred in. I know,
but
he was a question mark. He played a lot of snaps.
Yeah,
there's no doubt. But
was there.
Let's not sit here and act like Bo Nix was viewed as a can't miss transfer the way that Dylan Gabriel was a year ago. He came back for the next year, was a Heisman finalist, and that was the year we knew that Bo was going to have a good year. But it's the most important position I think you can argue for them this year, which is why a lot of the other takeaways that I had were important for whoever that ends up being. I do think it's going to be Dante Moore, but they look good at wide receiver. Evan Stewart didn't play in the game, but he was in uniform on the sideline. There's been some weird kind of stories about him this spring of how engaged is he. He had the back injury at the end of last season. Is he going to want to fight through that? Is he just kind of hanging out until he's ready for the NFL draft? That's one that I'm keeping my eye on. He's not in the portal, so he's not going anywhere. The portal is now closed. He was in uniform on the sideline, but he didn't play. All the other young wide receivers and Kenyon Sadiq look like they're ready to kind of carry the offense from a skill position standpoint. And so that's going to help whoever the quarterback ends up being. I did think they all had flashes and moments. They all made a couple of bad throws, and they were all under pressure the entire game, which was the other takeaway. And that is Dan Lanning, his first 3 years at Oregon, has essentially grabbed every elite defensive lineman on the West Coast. And there's a lot of names that people, unless you follow recruiting and roster building, you just forget about because they haven't played. And all these guys are 4 or 5 star recruits. And I think the defensive line is going to be nasty this year. Aiden Breland was a guy who came on a little bit at the end of last season. So was Amari Washington, as basically true sophomores. They're ready to take big steps. You got Elijah Rushing, who was a 5-star recruit, Terrence Green, Teon Gray. Like, these guys are big, they're physical, and they have been waiting their turn. Because
also Mateo coming back.
Mateo coming back, and Tuioti coming back. Blake Purchase, who redshirted last year. Like, he has spent 3 years understanding, what did we talk about out of the Super Bowl? What wins when you can dominate games on a defensive line?
Yep.
How did Georgia win a national championship having like 10 NFL draft picks in their front 7 on defense? Like,
Ohio State's D-line stepped up at the very end of the year.
And they dominated games at the end of the year. That's how you win. And so all these guys are freshmen, sophomores, or redshirt sophomores, or whatever, but they've been developed in the program. They've been putting on weight. They've been getting bigger, and those guys look like the real deal this weekend.
Oregon's spring game takeaways from one of our Duck pregame hosts, Andy Dirt Johnson.
That's right.
They're going to win the Super Bowl.
They're going to win the Super Bowl this year.
It looks like they might be Super Bowl
maybe
favorites.
World Series too. We'll see.
That'd be pretty amazing.
I think they could get the World Series and the Super Bowl in the same year.
That'd be the first time in sports history a team's done that.
Well, they did win a national championship last year. They won multiple, technically. 2 different people gave them a national championship.
Dude,
so
I can't
Dan
wait.
Lanning's already got 2 of those things.
Who's their home game starter? Who's the first game they play at home this year?
Montana State.
Montana State, when they raise that Wolf banner.
It's going to be a big deal.
As the best team in college football
Give
last
out their
year.
Wolf rings. They got a wolf on them. Everybody's going to go, ow! It's going to be a huge deal, dude.